we've got enough folks that have joined. We've got a lot to cover. I'm gonna go ahead and kick us off here. So thank you everybody for joining. We're excited about today's session. We have a lot to get through. This is a dense topic. So we have brought in some experts here. So give me just a sec. I'm like multitasking, trying to let people in.
I can
Reese, maybe.
I'll let people in. I got it. Yep.
Cool. So the goal for today is to do a deep dive on everything enrichment. Talk about how it's currently done. Talk about how it should be done in this sort of new age. So for those of you that haven't met us, there's some friendly faces on here. Andrew, what's up, man? It's good to see you. Thanks for being here. Reese and I are the co-founders of Domestique. We've been running this thing for 5 years. We've worked together for several years before that at multiple different in-house companies. We grew up on different sides of the funnel, so there's a lot of healthy tension between the way that we operate. And we have brought in one of the best and brightest in the enrichment space, specifically in this sort of new age of enrichment. Elio, you wanna do a little intro here?
Hey, thank you, Alex, and good to see you, everyone. My name is Elio, co-founder and CEO at ScaleStack, originally from Italy, but based in New York City now for many, many years. Super happy to be here and excited about what we're going to chat about.
Yeah, so, okay, let's just dive in. One little bit of keeping is I don't want to listen to myself talk the whole time. I definitely don't want to listen to Reese talk the whole time. So if you have questions, if you have comments, if you have pushback, if you want to dive into a specific example for your company, raise your hand, drop a question in the comment, and we'll dive in. So I think it's important to start with setting the stakes here. So we fundamentally believe that enrichment is a board level problem. It is not just a RevOps or a systems issue. And this might not land well with everybody. Some people might push back on this, but especially in this new age where everybody's trying to find a way to take advantage of AI in go-to-market, we all know that, it's bad data in, bad results out, right? That has always been the case. It is even more so with AI, right? It is just compounded this, right? So you're going to feel this in your routing, in your duplicates, in your outbound deliverability and bounces. I know that almost all of our clients deal with a version of that. Your ability to target the right people at the right accounts with the right message at the right time. Your reps losing time. And then a point that Elio really made well when we were all putting this together was this idea of the lack of trust that you have in your go-to-market data. Elio, you wanna expand on that point a little bit?
Yeah, no, I think that the issue around trust it's been going on for a long time, but do we trust the data in our CRM? Do we trust the marketing data? What's an MQL? What's an SQL? It's just that the speed at which things are happening now is so much faster that it's even more impactful. And we'll touch on that later, but with AI, you can do things faster at a much larger scale. And so the implication of that lack of trust in the original foundational data are much bigger. And if you don't trust the data, then everything, downstream falls apart, whether that's like an internal type of territory mapping exercise, or that's like a emailer campaign that you're sending out to prospects. You need to trust your data.
And what's interesting, one of the comments that Elio is making here that I think is so important to highlight is like, one of the things that we do when we first go into partnering with clients is trying to understand like what's the North Star, what are the 1 or 2, 3 business goals that an organization is trying to work on, and it's not hit the number, right? But what is it the thing you're trying to do to hit the number? Oh, we didn't have enough pipeline last year, so we got to grow from 3x to 4x. But in order to be able to do that, you got to stand up in an outbound motion. To Elio's point exactly right there, if you don't trust the data, it's really hard to then be able to go do that. Well, if you stand up an outbound motion, who's your ICP? How are you going out there? Do you have like all those things are this kind of downstream impact from this? And one of the common questions we'll often ask as we're getting in and kind of asking is like, oh, do you have the SOM, serviceable attainable market, download into your CRM? 9 times out of 10 is a no. And like, if you think about it, if you're trying to market it, you don't even have the SOM in a trustworthy way in your CRM. How are you, capturing that, capturing the opportunity of being able to kind of like get in front of those potential clients?
Yeah, agreed. Cool. Okay, so we agree this is a problem that's worth solving. So today, we're going to talk about how enrichment used to work, why it broke, the common problems that I think everybody on this phone call is grappling with every day, a modern approach. Notice we said a modern approach, not the modern approach. There are many ways of doing this. We think we've got a clever way. Where an orchestration layer helps. We're going to spend a lot of time on this. And then we're going to talk through 2 or 3 specific examples of where this can actually show up. We've all heard about, read about, well, hopefully some of us have started to implement this idea of, waterfall enrichment, but we're actually going to talk about what that looks like. And then obviously Q&A throughout. All right, Elio,
thank you, Alex. Yeah, we touched on this a little bit earlier, but I just want to put like a double click here, because with everything that is happening with AI, I mean, we as ScaleStack are working with AI and we are shocked by the progress. And, every 3 months, like it gets faster and faster and faster. So the models are becoming like so good. The problem at the enterprise level, at the company level, so we're not talking about like, an individual using like an AI tool. We're talking about like at the company level. At the company level, you need the models, you need AI, but you also need data that can be trusted. There was a famous study last year, like from MIT, which is the reason why I came to the US in the first place to study. And they said, I mean, it was like a bit of a clickbait title, but like 95% of Gen AI pilots at companies have failed. But behind the headline, there was a truth, which is like you need good data. And you don't just need the data for an individual or a small team or a small data set. The entire company data needs to be trusted, needs to be in good shape in order to do AI. And so we have seen evidence of like this lack of trust or bad data in many, many different companies. I mean, Umberto Pavilion and, CMO Pavilion like described how they invested in a lot of AI tools and the conversion rates went down.
Yeah. Because
the data lived in 7 different systems, and because like there was 40% duplicate records in their CRM, or another company that we've worked with, like, they had like an amazing engine to generate leads and contacts, and yet a lot of them had like free emails, and like sales doesn't want to touch Gmails. And so like marketing was saying, oh, we produce all these like leads, but then sales doesn't know how to, what to do with them. Or another company like, drowning every time that they needed to do territory mapping, which I mean like impacts people compensation. No, you want to distribute an equitable book of business across the org. And if you don't have good data, you cannot do that. And you see people like scrambling last minute and usually doing like, an inferior job because they have poor data.
Yep. Yeah, it's I mean it's a really good point. One thing that we talk about a lot here, right, is like whether you're pro AI in the go-to-market or against it, like it is here, and it's something we have to contend with. And one of the and this is kind of a little tee up to this next point here, but it really is adding fuel to a fire, right? Which could be good or it could be bad. If you have a solid enrichment infrastructure in your go-to-market, you've got reliable data, it can be fuel to a very positive fire. On the inverse of that, if you don't have trustworthy data, it is going to exacerbate any problems you are currently dealing with. Elio, you want to walk us through some of the common
some of the
go-to-market
problems.
problems? Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it is clear that like we need data from multiple sources, no? And so we've been using like, the Zoom Info, the Lucia, the Apollo for many years. But I think that it's clear that like not one single vendor covers every segment, persona, geo. You also need like intelligence to decide which data sources to use, because some data sources are good for some attributes and you need other attributes from other data sources. And how do you decide that in a dynamic system? And then you need to adapt that data, because I mean, all the data vendors, which do like a phenomenal job of putting together this like databases, they sell the database to exactly the same to everyone. So you sort of need to compose the data based on your ICP and your go-to-market strategy. And that's a difficult task. And then you cannot do just with like automation, point-to-point automation in workflow that are handled manually. It's tough. It's really, they break down at scale usually. You need like to decide like from conflicting, different sources. How do you like reconcile like what is your truth? And also, I mean, AI is giving us these amazing capabilities of building like so many different apps, right? So English is becoming the standard programming language. So it means that everybody can code. Those apps need good data that is coherent across all these different apps, because otherwise, like, it's a disaster. And then you need to think about governance and scalability. I mean, things, simpler things like managing rate limits across different data sources, but also thinking about cost, because that, one thing is to have like an individual tool, another thing is like the entire data set. And then the other problem, which is very common, is that people do the enrichment when they have like the urgent need, for instance, like territory mapping, and they don't think in a systemic way, into like, this is a system that I need to have constantly running, hopefully in the background.
You know what's funny to that, Elio, is like the way when we ever see this is like, you go in with a client, and whether they have Zoom Info or, one of these others, and you ask them how many of the one-time credits they've used or how many of the reoccurring credits they've used. And the answers are like, it's always like, we're out of the one-time credits and we haven't used any of the reoccurring monthly credits. And like exactly like the point right there of like, this is a one-time fix. People do it one time. And it's not this always on dynamic thing. It's adapting to as the business changes, things like that.
Yeah. So, I feel like I could call on anybody here in this webinar, and any one of you could present this slide, right? This is how enrichment used to work. We've all run a version of this play, right? You get your leads or your records or your companies, whatever it is, right? You do a list buy, you get some CSVs, you've got maybe an upfront provider, right? You get your firmographics and your contacts associated to companies. Okay, great. If you're thoughtful, maybe you're refreshing that data quarterly, and then your go-to-market executors, right? Your BDRs, your reps, your CSMs, are manually researching those records and verifying strategic accounts, right? This works because there was lower volume, fewer systems, simpler motions. But like Elio has shared, it's like this was as good as the technology allowed for. Like this is how we had to run these plays. The point that Elio has made to Reese and I several times in our sort of sessions before this is like, AI really is the unlock here, that this technology now enables us to move much faster through this. And if we are not executing, at this higher rate, the cost of not executing at this faster, more efficient, more reliable rate is just going to continue to compound.
Yeah, it's funny because AI, it's like the reason why we can now do this in a different, better way is because of AI. You know, you cannot do true enrichment like just with automation, deterministic automation, but also AI is like the catalyst for change because again, we have mentioned this, you know, in order to have like tools and apps running like coherently, you need good data. And so this is what we're seeing, especially at the company level. I always like have to frame the context. This is like at the company level, because as an individual users, I have access to a lot of data and, you know, I modify it, I do it whatever I want. But it's at the company level that things become very complex because you want a consistent truth across the entire org.
Yeah.
And so having the data ready for AI at the systemic level, you know, like Reddit, one of our customers that like, you know, really needed to transform hygiene. And hygiene seems like, oh yeah, like CRM hygiene. No, in the age of AI, it becomes like strategic, even like having CRM hygiene.
In LAO, one important point that you're making right there is like pretty much every company we've ever worked with has a hygiene issue, right? It's on a spectrum of like, is this like on fire or is it just kind of bad? But it's like, it's the classic like Eisenhower matrix, right? Is this an important versus an urgent thing? And like hygiene never becomes an important thing until like there's that like critical thing, just like you brought up of like the account mapping, or we're trying to stand up an outbound motion or something like that. But if you have it always on, it becomes a competitive advantage for you because you're not doing this one time and you can react to things in real time. So like hygiene actually becomes a competitive advantage. And it doesn't have to be world class. It just has to be like not garbage.
You need to trust it. Yeah, because exactly. This is like, you know,
need to trust it.
100% hygiene or whatever, like the word that you want to use, is probably impossible. We'll see. Maybe we'll get there with AI. But you need to have like a truth that you believe in. And we'll talk about like some confidence score later on in the deck. But yeah, systemic data ready for AI, and then bespoke to our companies. Our companies are different. And so, you know, each of us have different ICPs and go-to-market strategies. And so the composition of that truth is different for me than it is for you guys or for the next company. And so like having a system that can customize this enrichment to whatever we need is important. And then like very important that like once you fix the like foundational problems like hygiene, then you can think about growth. Then you can say, okay, now I trust my data. Now how can build like new ICP maps? We do this for customers like Harvey, you know, like they're entering new markets. And so like, how do you do that? Or MongoDB that needs to create new pipeline for a huge amount of leads that they have from free-tier Atlas signups. And so this is what we see customers typically need and want.
Yeah, cool. All right, so we've kind of talked through current state, right? Problems that we're all dealing with, how enrichment used to work, why it's not working. I think if you're on this webinar, I imagine you agree with most of what has been said so far. So now we're going to talk about the modern enrichment playbook, right? We're gonna dive in. So before we do, we just want to kind of cover off on some quick definitions here, right? So the left-hand side here, right? You know, these are the sort of standard use cases or the problems that, you know, a lot of us need to solve. And on the right, you know, we've got the components of a go-to-market tech stack, right? So enrichment, right, is just adding missing attributes to your records, right? Hygiene is things like validation, deduplication, normalization within your CRM, your marketing automation platform, whatever it is. And then your sort of signals and expansion, right? So turning that data into inputs for growth, right? So it's percent likelihood to buy. So your scoring, your ICP discovery, all that. How this all is going to work together, right? Inputs, orchestration, activation. Inputs, this is your forms, your partners, your list imports, your CRM, your marketing automation platform. Orchestration, has been the missing layer, and now because of AI and tools like a ScaleStack, it is not, right? So your rules and your waterfall and your governance, all of this is just pre-work for pre-work's sake if we don't action on it. And this is where the activation comes in, right? So this is how you, in an automated way, act on this newly available data. So your routing, your scoring, your segmentation, right? And it's really the coordination of all of this that starts to allow enrichment to be either a board level problem or a board level solution. Cool.
Yeah, and by the way, if there are questions and people disagree, please raise your hand, be vocal. Don't be shy. We're all very open here. The way we think about the modern tech stack is really what companies like Clay have become very popular, and for good reasons. And I think that orchestration layer becomes important because inputs are coming from many different places. And the examples that we said earlier, the company that had the pavilion company that had 7 different systems. And so those are internal systems. Then there are forms and contacts, and then you have the events, and then you have job postings, press releases that contain a host of data that you can use for your go-to-market, the public web, and so on. And so orchestrating all of that to then feed the system of record, which needs to be well updated and trusted, so that everybody believes that what's in the CRM is not terrible, but it's usable. And then the activation layer. So the sales log, the outreach, the places where you can do the routing, the segmentation, but also think about apps. Again, English as the main programming language. People want to build apps. I mean, a lot of companies are reassessing the build versus buy based on this, because they can build their own apps. But those apps all need good data. And so you need a system that feeds into the systems of record with good data. And that, it's our belief, is the orchestration layer.
Yeah, awesome. So we've talked about waterfall enrichment. If you're on this webinar, if you're watching the video after, you've heard of waterfall enrichment. Here's a bit of a high-level overview of it, right? So you've got some trigger, right? A new lead comes into your marketing automation platform, or there's stale data and there's a automation that allows it to get refreshed, right? So that there's some top of funnel early on trigger. The waterfall approach is you go to provider A as your primary, provider B, your fallback, provider C, that's sort of last mile, last ditch. Then you validate everything. Then you write it to your CRM, marketing automation platform, wherever it is you're writing that data. And along the way, you've got control levers, right? You want to be able to be in control of the order of the providers, the specific required fields that you are choosing to enrich. And then so your CFO doesn't yell at you credit caps, right? It's very easy to accidentally spend a lot of money with these tools. So just saying that out loud for everybody here. Conflict handling, right? If sources disagree, what do you do, right? If there's data that already exists in your CRM or your marketing automation platform and a new provider has different data, what happens? Do you flag those exceptions? What are the sort of automated rules? And then measurement. This is not very sexy. This is for all the RevOps people in the room here. You need to be obsessing over things like match rate, fill rate, freshness of your data, because otherwise you're just spending money on a problem without knowing if you're actually solving it.
One note that I want to put here is that there was an artist that last year went viral because she said, like, I want AI to do my laundry and I do the poetry, right? And so I think that a lot of this stuff is not just automation, but we can inject like agentic intelligence to decide and resolve these conflicts and decide like across data sources. And so we have this incredible opportunity to do this, like, frankly, little bit boring stuff. Delegate to, it's a fantastic use case for AI, right? Because AI is still very, very good at like convergent thinking, which, like synthesizing data, analyzing it, like deciding based on like different, data sets. But like the divergent thinking, the new ideas, that's for humans still. And so I think that this is a fantastic application of AI. Because to do a lot of these things that you just mentioned, you need intelligence. We could not do what we're doing just with automation, deterministic type of components, but we need like that automation, that autonomy, which can be given to agents.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so
Alex, we got a question in the chat. So Charlie's asking, what are you seeing the most popular or most currently used today solutions for provider A, B, and C? So I'm going to flip back to the previous one.
Yeah, Elio, you wanna
Well,
jump
I mean,
in?
that's what we mean by that. It's really the data layer. So A, B, C can be like the Zoom Info, the Lucia, the Apollo, but it can be, again, like, data from like my prospects' websites, data from press releases, job postings have like so much data in it, like, the technologies that they use, the platforms that they use, and so the type of skills that they find, they look for. And so those are like providers. So and it will depend on like a case by case, which is another way, like, to apply AI. So, but I mean, the popular ones are like brands that we all know, like the Apollo, the Zoom Info, etc. And then, like, data in the public web. I put like Clay in a different category, which is more like, yes, they have like data sources natively integrated into the platform. But to me, Clay is more like, for like a smaller data set, is that orchestrator that creates like data from multiple sources.
Yeah, it's a really good question. One thing that I'll add is you want to be thoughtful about the types of providers, right? So Zoom Info and Clay solve very different problems, right? And Zoom Info is what we have all used, or Apollo is what we have all used, or Dun & Bradstreet. All these sort of traditional enrichment providers, great, you can still use it, but there will be a fill gap or a match rate gap, right? And how can you then lean on something like a Clay to go and scrape and go and find more specific data layers after that, right? So not each provider needs to be solving for the same thing as well.
No, and you can't. And I mean, we have like deployed workflows at customers where, they have, for larger companies, I mean, they have, I don't know, 100,000 accounts, and then 20,000 are top accounts. And typically for the larger companies, Dun & Bradstreet is the better source. For smaller companies, startups, emerging, Crunchbase is better, right? And so there is no, when we say like no single source of truth as an input, it's because the truth will be your truth. So it depends on your go-to-market, depends on your ICP, depends on like how you compose that puzzle for yourself. So that's very important. Your truth is different than anyone else. And then secondly, each data source, and those data sources include also like the enormous amount of data that is available on the public web, will be good for certain things and not everything. And so you want to compose the data differently, depending on what those data sources are good at.
And to Elio's point, one of the things that we've seen has a big impact on that industry. So like, for example, certain industries, we do a lot with kind of med tech, health tech. There's things like definitive health that is vastly better than a Zoom Info. Others is geo-based. So if you have a lot of US-based companies in your ICP versus European-based, certain providers have a lot more kind of European data, partially driven by GDPR regulation. So like, to Elio's point, like you need to understand who is your ICP to be able to then say, what are the right sources I can match against these based upon some of these factors?
Really good question. So this is a nice little tee up because we want to talk about this idea of minimum viable enrichment, right? This is usually the point at our webinars where folks go, okay, great. This all sounds nice. This all sounds like we'd love to be able to do all that, but like, what's the basics that I need to actually focus on? Because it's impossible to get all this right. So what we recommend is like focus for the sort of downstream decisions you're trying to make, not just enriching more fields, right? So break these up into different decisions. We've got some examples here, right? So routing, right? So there's team data here, there's territory data here. What are the minimum fields you need for routing? You need your geo, whatever, however you're routing. If you're routing based on country, you need country. If you're routing based on state, you need state. City, city, zip, zip, right? You need the account match, you need the employee band, you need likely industry, right? So, and then what happens if it's missing, right? You need SLAs around, okay, well, what's going to happen if we route a lead to Reese when it should have gone to Charlie, right? You need to be able to understand why. Qualifying your ICP. This is a big one. Reese talked about this earlier, this idea of having your SOM within your database. You have to be able to, one, you have to have a definition of your ICP, which a lot of companies don't. But two, you need to be able to have that codified within your CRM. Segment your messaging, right? AI has really opened up the ability to deliver the right message to the right person at the right account at the right time, but you need to be able to segment the people and the companies so that you can target them with your specific messaging. If I think, Andrew is a chief revenue officer, because that's what it says in my HubSpot instance, but he's actually the director of IT, I'm going to waste my time, I'm going to waste my credits, I'm going to be chasing down somebody that has no buying power for what I'm trying to set. Like that happens all the time. Scoring and prioritization, right? I mean, whether it's lead scoring, account scoring, opportunity scoring, I think that one's obvious. So the point we're trying to make here is, don't just enrich your database to enrich it. Enrich the fields that allow you to make the high impact business decisions. This is not an exhaustive list, but these are a lot of the heavy hitters.
Yeah, and I mean, I see the time is running fast, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide. I think the key message here is like, in order to improve the data, we need to change it. We need to we need to write new data. And so like sometimes that's scary and we understand that. And so you need to have like different like categorization of fields and what's the source of truth and who has like the ownership to override. The cool thing is that, again, we can delegate now this to agents. And then another cool thing that we are seeing across customers is that particularly for sales and marketing use cases, I mean, we're not trying to send like a man or a woman to the moon. And so like, there could be mistakes. The important thing is that the trust in the data is like higher because generally like it's better. And also you need to identify, like you said, Alex, just now, like, what are the fields that are really important? For those fields, what we are like increasingly doing for customers is that we put like a confidence score on that data point. So that like, not only this is the truth that as we currently see it, like, I don't know, I'll give you an example, like the revenue number for like all of your prospects, right? So how much revenues does the company make, which a lot of our customers use as like, the North Star to segment them. We also give, together with that truth, a confidence score. Hey, this like revenue number is like, we're highly confident. And typically you want to have a high confidence for like all of your like, 1/3 of top accounts in your CRM. And then the other, like, we still have to do some research, etc. And so that's a very important thing that we are doing our customers, and that is changing the way they trust the data.
Awesome. And one additional thing is you're kind of thinking through this as you're thinking through the priority of kind of work you have to do throughout the quarter, particularly ops work. I think it's important to tie all this work back to the business outcomes, because oftentimes, and I don't know if we have any CEOs or executives on here, and if we do, I apologize for the next statement. I've met several in my day who don't necessarily understand the sausage making, and that's not a knock. They shouldn't be in the details and all that type of good stuff. But if you're sitting there saying, hey, we need to spend X amount of time making sure this is good, they're going to be like, WTF, why are we doing this? And it's like, we are doing this because this is going to help us, set up that outbound motion, which is going to help drive us that 4X pipe. Like tying it to those initiatives helps kind of tie together that narrative of like why it's so important to like dedicate time and resources to this.
Yeah, agree. This is another one of Reese's favorite points here. We're big believers in operating cadence, right? And one of the things that we talk a lot about internally is whether it's an attribution model or a scoring model or an enrichment model or a sales compensation package or a territory plan, you need to be revisiting it, measuring it, optimizing it. So specific to the sort of overall enrichment play that we're talking about, this is what we recommend you measure. To Reese's point here, that the very bottom here, outcomes, what is the core business outcome you're trying to drive? This is just an example. But upstream of that, the inputs for that, you want to be looking at things like your match rate. For example, leads and or contacts to accounts. Are you able to match that? Elio brought up the idea or the point earlier of, Gmails and sort of non-business emails. That's a problem. If you start to see a flux of that, you need to call that out. A fill rate, right? Not for every single field, but again, back to the core fields that you need to make the core business decisions. Are you getting to your point, Elio, are you consistently getting the core ICP fields you need, i.e. annual revenue? If you're not, I think it was Charlie that asked the question earlier about, which providers, right? If you're not getting consistently the fields you need to make your core decisions, i.e. annual revenue, geo, industry, whatever it is, you might have a provider level issue. Okay, so go back and reorder those providers. Freshness, right? When was the last time you ran an update on this data? Is this data from 2019 or from last quarter? Duplicates, I'm not going to spend time on this. We've all lost sleep over duplicates. It's a pain in the ass. And then routing accuracy, right? I mean, this is a big one. Sending the right leads to the right reps or CSMs or AEs, whatever it is, really important, right? So you should be measuring this. And again, you can build some reports. It doesn't have to be a time suck, but this is not a set it and forget it activity, I guess is the point that we're trying to make here. Okay, we're making progress. So these are the sort of three, I don't know, like pipes or pipelines, right? That like you really need to be focusing on. The data coming in, ingestion, the core system that you're dealing with, and then how you are activating it, right? So wherever you are getting go-to-market data coming into your systems, forms, record imports, product integrations, partners, you need to be obsessing over the data hygiene and process through which data comes into those systems. The amount of times I have seen issues because there's a field marketer that comes in with an import of a CSV of leads and just imports it directly into Salesforce with no structure, no governance, no process, and then it gets routed in correctly would blow your mind. The core system here, it's that match, waterfall, validate, dedupe, and then you activate it, right? So that could be routing, it could be scoring, it could be segmenting, it could be an automated go-to-market play, right? But you really want to start to break down the overall enrichment process into these three buckets, because it will allow you to troubleshoot when it goes wrong, because it will go wrong. I have never, Reese, I know you have never, and Elio, I would bet a lot of money that you have never seen a company that has had 100% data accuracy when it comes to anything that we're talking about here. So you need to be able to get specific with where and how you're troubleshooting.
The other good news here is like, it's also going to highlight not just your enrichment needs, but where there's breakdowns in the processes. We literally ran into a company here recently that was ingesting stuff when they're from the product when a ticket was requested, and they weren't capturing email addresses. So like you have a support ticket and you don't have an email, so then you can't capture on the company record all of these support. So like that, like this helps kind of understand the whole ecosystem inclusively. And so if you think about this conversation about enrichment, it's not just this kind of like external third-party data sources, but it's all the data flowing through your system.
Yeah, it's a great point.
Yeah, including like internal data sources. I mean, there is data like across so many systems. Data that you own, like forget about the data that you buy, which is also important, but like the data that you own is in many different places. And then again, like data sources for us are also like, the public web or like, job boards and anything else. I mean, this is, like I want to leave like a few minutes for the Q&A, but like, again, the orchestrator layer, like represented by company like ScaleStack or Clay, and like, they will orchestrate and create those agentic waterfalls to then like bring good data into systems of records like the CRMs or like data lakes or wherever the data needs to live, and also into activation platforms like, the Gong, the Sales Loft, the Outreach. So data gets like taken from the sources, orchestrated, clean, enriched, prioritized, and then put into the system of record or put into activation platform. And maybe if you want to go to the next slide, there are like different platforms for different needs. I think Clay has done like a fantastic, it's a great product that has done a fantastic job to explain the importance of this. It's a spreadsheet metaphor and interface. I think it's a great product for individual users, for smaller teams and data sets. It does like multi-source enrichment. Someone was asking that earlier. We operate in a different area of the market, which is like systemic data, like for larger companies with workflows that need to run constantly with very little like maintenance. We're very big in like conversational interfaces so that you can compose a workflow by explaining to the agent what is that you want to do, and the agent will figure out how to build the workflow. And then, I mean, we are very good at like managing rate limits, which sometimes across data sources is a huge mess. We're also multi-source, etc. But so there are different ways to solve this in the market, and it's important to think that like as a different layer than strictly the data source layer.
Yeah, love it. Okay, we are very close, and then hopefully we can dive into some Q&A here. So we always try to end these webinars with actual real world examples, so it's not just a bunch of talking, right? So we're going to talk through a few different examples here. This is one of the most common use cases here, right? So workflow one, right? It's your sort of inbound lead to enrich to scored to routed. This is a play that most companies run, right? So where are you capturing that lead? Is it a form that lives on a site? Is it an event? Is there a list import? Is it a product qualified lead? However that happens, you need to normalize that data, standardize it, dedupe it, match, to an account and contact, enrich in that sort of waterfall approach. Provider A, primary, provider B, provider C, score it on the ICP level, looking at all the behavioral intent signals, and then route accordingly, right? This is a very common example that you can start to take advantage of. Workflow 2, example 2. This one's a little bit more of a pain in the ass and is a little bit more complicated, but if you get it right, it makes a huge difference. If you get it wrong, it makes an even bigger difference. Account hierarchy and therefore territory mapping, right? So parent to child accounts, whether you're in Salesforce or HubSpot or whatever tool you're using, this is something you have to get right. So you've got your global HQ, you've got your different subsidiaries. You need to be able to understand all the firmographics associated with each of these, right? Annual revenue, location for both, especially if you're routing back to the global headquarters. This has a huge impact, right? So this is a big one that can get really tricky.
And we see this all the time, particularly in certain business industries. And like, this goes haywire in a couple of places. One, when you do big imports, or, imports can be a data list, buying a Zoom info or like that type of thing, as well as the ongoing day-to-day. Like if you don't have SLAs and or automation and or agentic AI set up to kind of manage this stuff gets out of control quickly, and then it screws up all the different examples we've been talking about: account grading, territories, outbound, all of that stuff.
And finally, this one's not as sexy, but it does matter, the sort of staleness trigger, right? How old is your data? And again, not all data is created equal. What is the data? What is the MVE, the minimum viable enrichment data that you need in order to make the thoughtful business outcome decisions that you're looking for? How old is your annual revenue data on your SOM? If it's 4 years old, it's probably outdated, right? So you really want to start to get a handle of that. Okay, so
yeah, just one note that I want to do is
yeah,
is that like a lot of these examples that you've shown, like the most important thing is to define the business logics. And that's where, like, you guys like are great in helping customers like understanding their business and adapting the business logics to them. What we do have now with AI is that we don't need to spend as much time as we used to, like to, operate the information, because a lot of it can be absorbed by agents. And so that's like the new thing that we can do here. That like, it's really important to spend most of your time on the business logics, and then everything else like sort of can be delegated to an agentic layer.
I love it. Love it. Okay. And finally, before we open it up for Q&A, we try to end all this with just a practical, no BS 30, 60, 90 approach to start to make progress towards this. Depending on the size of your company, depending on your budget, you might not have access to all of these tools, but here's a sort of realistic approach that you can take to start to improve the overall data quality, to improve the business outcomes, right? So in your first 30 days, right, like audit your fields. Do you need all of them? What are the core fields you need? Baseline your metrics and come up with the sort of triggers that really matter. Next, implement that sort of waterfall validation approach, right? There are tools out there that make this easier. It doesn't need to be perfect, but start to monitor it. And eventually, really start to focus on how fresh or how stale is your data. Like that's a bit of a run version, but if you can really start to invest in this, I mean, we fundamentally believe that the companies that don't focus on this in 2026 are going to not just miss out on 2026, but they are not going to be able to take advantage of all of the enhancements that AI is bringing to go to market in 2026, 2027, and beyond. The data layer is the bedrock of being able to pull it off. So focus on this now. Otherwise, pay the consequences later. Okay, that's it. what questions does everybody have? I know we got a couple in the chat throughout, but we've got a few minutes here. So if anybody has any questions, we would love to dive in.
Just so everybody knows, Elio is one of the smartest people in this space. So you got an opportunity here.
Thank you. You guys are very, very smart. I've you and I have been in touch now for a couple of years. I remember an investor put us in touch like 2 years ago and said like, oh, I think there's something that you should talk about. No, I'm so excited by like all of this. Like AI is like I am old enough to have seen like the mobile wave and then the cloud wave, and I did stuff in both. But this wave is completely different, man. It's the speed at which things are like going. And I mean, I'm an optimist, and so like I think that we'll find a way as humans to like coexist with AI. But like what we are seeing is that a lot of like especially the back office stuff can be done by AI, and so that people like you, smart, like with customers that spend time understanding their needs, can define the business logic, the inputs, and all of that stuff. Caleb.
Yeah, along with what you're saying there, would you agree then with AI that some of the key pieces that we're looking at is just having proper guardrails in place to make sure that the data enrichment is happening accurately? Also, just always, I mean, especially initially, as young as it is, having just a human in the loop to make sure that there's the verification prior to pushing that data into the enrichment.
I agree with everything you've said. What we do see at customers is that you want to have human in the loop when like the output is touching other humans. And so like for instance, like before sending like those emails, you should have like someone checking like that email makes sense and like it's human enough so that it won't be perceived differently. The confidence score that we talked about specific attributes, that's for us, it's a guardrail. So it's like, how confident and transparently communicate, because I mean, like if you communicate to, let's say, your reps, hey, for like these accounts, I'm very sure that like this data is right. And while for this, like we're still doing some research in the background, I think that that's a guardrail that people understand. And then the third component is to have a system in place. Don't do this once and then like, then remember like a year later when you have to do the exercise. Having a system in place, and luckily, as we mentioned earlier, like AI is both a catalyst why you have to have a system in place, but it's also providing the solution with people spending more time not on the menial task of cleaning the data and going row by row, but actually spending time, okay, what is the logic that makes sense? What are the attributes that I really need? I've seen like a customers, changing, especially in the RevOps team, sales ops teams that we support, switching from being like, oh, we need to process tickets to like they almost become like product managers, because they're starting to think exclusively about the business logic, the apps. When I say apps is like what do you do with the data, rather than like, oh my gosh, I need to go row by row. I have to have like hire like 10 people in, I don't know, the Philippines to go like row by row to see if it's clean. No, that's like, forget it. Now there are systems that we can deploy to do that.
And to Elio's point here, think about how cool this space is right now. Like back in the day, to the point he's just making, like you had to do this in this big, massive undertaking. You did it once a year. Now you can have an always on dynamic data enrichment tool that is adjusting as your ICP, as the business change. Like that's awesome. Like, and so like, how do we kind of get the initial setup so you can have that always on dynamic? Looks like there's another question from Charlie. For complex enterprise parent-child mapping, what is your favorite enrichment validation solution? Good question. Elio, do you have an opinion?
I mean, again, like the data. So in order to do parent-child, what is that? You need to know who is like the parent and what are the subsidiaries. where is that data? So there are like data sources that like I don't know, Dun and Bradstreet that can have that data. Exactly. And then there are other data sources like press release or like job posting or like other like the company's websites that will contain that data. And it's usually, if it's like first layer data, better than like whatever database that you can buy. And so what we do, for instance, is that like customers maybe buy like Dun and Bradstreet, and then like we complement that with like agents that do research on top of the data. And so, okay, I see this company for Dun and Bradstreet is like the parent. Let me go check on the website if it's really true. Let me go check what are the other subsidiaries. And so that's a way to do that. You still need the data. You can leverage other like data sources from the public web, and you can leverage AI to do that validation, to do that research on top.
It's a great question. What are the questions? Cool. That's all we got. Thank you very much for the time. Thanks for putting up with us. Elio, as always,
Thank you.
Brilliant. Really appreciate your time. Man, it means a lot to us. Yeah. Okay. I hope everybody has a great rest of the day. We will send out the deck. We'll send out the recording. We'll send it all out tomorrow.
Thank you.
Have a good day.